Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final week of the Kuma International Architecture Month. This week, we are talking about division and resilience, and our first guest tonight will be Igor Kuvač, followed by Nasiha Pozdir on Thursday. We would like to thank everyone for joining us on Facebook and also in our Zoom live session. So thank you so much for being with us for this entire month. We really appreciate it. We really hope that you also enjoy our lecture tonight. So we are very, very happy to welcome Igor back. He was actually with us last year during our first Kuma International Architecture Week, and he also contributed to the publication Unfolding Sarajevo. So feel free to check out also his work in the publication, which you can get at Buy Book. And so just a little bit more about Igor. Igor actually finished his undergrad and master's at the University of Banja Luka, and then he completed his PhD at the University of Granada in Spain, where he also now, well, he teaches now as an associate at the Faculty of Architecture, Civil Engineering and Geodesy at the University of Banja Luka. And he also is the founder and CEO of the Center for Spatial Research. And through that Center of Spatial Research, Igor actually does quite a few interesting projects. So I'm sure if you follow them on Facebook or if you look at their website, you can see more about Center for Spatial Research. And I highly recommend that because they do have some really great projects that they also won some awards recently for. So Igor does a lot of things. His research focuses, his research is engaged in process of urban planning with a focus on increasing collective conscious about spatial potentials and planning culture in Bosnia and Herzegovina through activist design approach. And tonight, Igor is going to talk to us. We envisioned kind of Igor and Nasiha's lecture as kind of a first part and second part of kind of a similar story, since we're talking about divisions and resilience. So tonight, Igor is actually going to talk to us about the development of East Sarajevo, and which borders with like Dobrinja and the rest of Sarajevo, which Nasiha will kind of continue on in the next lecture. So we give Igor a warm welcome. We're so happy to have you back, Igor, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So for everybody, please feel free to ask your questions at the end, or if you have questions during Igor's presentations, you can type them in and then we can talk to Igor after his presentation. So welcome, Igor. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Leila. Many thanks for this nice introduction. Hello, everybody. It is really nice to be here, to be part of the Kuma International Architecture Month, and also to be in such a wonderful company of my colleagues from previous sessions, and also because I'm sharing this week's program with my dear colleague Nasiha Pozdir. It is really a privilege, and I owe my gratitude both to Kuma and to Leila for inviting me again. Well, my lecture is previously recorded last night, and I will just playing it. It's about 40 minutes length. My voice is a bit, monotonous, and maybe it would be a little bit sleepy, but there are some very interesting parts, I think, and parts where I am stuck and confused, so it is also a bit funny in recording. So I will just press play and share my screen, and then see you again in some 40 minutes. Yeah, hi again from my side, and thanks for being with us. As we have just said, I will speak about the subject divisions and resilience, and will tell. Oh, sorry, I'm just a bit confused.
It's okay.
Let me see how this works.
Maybe you can start with sharing the screen at the bottom.
Yes, but if I choose my screen, I can see the recording. Yeah, hi again from my side, and thanks for being with us. Do you see it now? As we have just said, I will speak about the subject divisions and resilience. We'll tell the story of two cities for development of East Sarajevo.
Igor, we don't have this.
The subject from a slightly different perspective. Again, many thanks to Leila for this challenge. Saying this, the word perspective is the key one, so it would be also nice for listeners or participants to think about the subject resilience and Sarajevo from the perspective which is a bit dislocated from only one mainstream view. Although the concept of resilience is relatively new in the discourse on urban planning and architectural design, recent research shows that certain elements of this concept are continuously present in the historical genesis of cities. The emergence and development of cities is often based on recovery after trauma, which speaks of the continuity of adaptation to specific conditions, which cities face spontaneously and which in some way characterizes the urban phenomenon and its development. Due to this,
Igor, I'm sorry, can you reactivate your audio, please? You're mute, I'm sorry.
The division of an existing city, the construction of a new one, and the transition of spatial identities from one to another can be recognized as a kind of resilient strategy in specific conditions. The case study is the process of planning and construction of East Sarajevo, which emerges and develops as an expression of local but also strategic and political resilience to major social challenges, war, conflict, migration process, and solving the roof over the head problem. Since the urban planning of a new city was carried out systematically, it is seen through the perspective of the political system as the main agent of the process. The study is based on 3 points of analysis: declarations of the main actors of the new city formation, spatial planning documents, which is our focus for tonight, and finally the spirit of Sarajevo as an essential element of identity of both cities. In describing the new city development under exceptional conditions, the lecture reveals some principles of resilience in this process and recognizes certain resilient spatial strategies which were spontaneously executed. My question is there any link or connection between divisions and resilience? Did the division of the city arise on a basis that became unsustainable and irresistible? Can the division be seen as a spatial strategy of resilience, considering the time, distance, and temporality of resistance? Finally, is this resilience sustainable in the long term, as it is not historically grounded? Or we should actually seek support in other contemporary aspects of resilience, those that are just becoming relevant or have yet to appear. Having in mind It is out of control. The urban is about to become a major vector of the imagination. In particular, what is missing in modern urbanism is a sense of time. Not time looking backwards nostalgically, but forward-looking time, the city understood as a process, its imaginary changing through use, and urban imagination image formed by anticipation, friendly to surprise. The lecture is structured as follows. And as I mentioned, although sustainability and resilience have been largely explored in many complex social and ecological systems, they have only recently been applied in the context of cities. This is also saying to us that continuous evolution of the notion of a sustainable and resilient built environment demands repeated examination. It is multi-layered and multidisciplinary construct. Generally, resilience is the capacity of a system, enterprise, or a person to maintain its core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. This can point to attributes of built space or urbanized space to withstand dramatic change in the environment. Resilience is also the ability to resist change without undue deformation. That is, it resists physical and structural obsolescence in particular. Considering a city as a place of interactions between humans and the built environment, maps of social activity reveal how urban and social systems have self-adaptive properties like complex dissipative systems. The three central features of resilience are the ability of a system to absorb or buffer disturbances and still maintain its core attributes, the ability of the system to self-organize, and the capacity for learning and adaptation in the context of change. Both sustainability and resilience concepts are useful when seeking an integrated approach to urban planning, as they help to look at the city as an interconnected and multidimensional system. Research on sustainability and resilience in urban design indicates that the most functional urban structures are those with multiple number of interconnections at all scales. Analyzing the sustainability and the resilience of urban systems involves looking at environmental, social, and economic aspects, as well as those related to technology, culture, and institutional structures. Sustainability, resilience, as well as integrated urban development are all focused on the process. Their objectives are typically defined around the ongoing operation of the process, and they can change during the time. Therefore, building a sustainable and resilient city is a collective endeavor that is about mindsets such as much as about physical structures and their operation, their capacity to anticipate and plan for the future, to learn and to adapt are paramount. Due to its multiculturalism, Sarajevo was known as European Jerusalem and West Damascus as a collection of cities or a mosaic city, a metaphor of space where different religions coexist without creating ghettos and giving the city specific cultural identity. At the same time, this mosaic is always being rebuilt, so it can be even physically seen in a continuous longitudinal section of Sarajevo Valley, highlighting different periods and layers of city development. the Ottoman city, Austro-Hungarian city, Yugoslavian city, in addition, Olympic city, and unfortunately the city of a war. When the war began, the urban region of Sarajevo was made up of 10 municipalities, of which 6 formed the city of Sarajevo, including Stari Grad, Centar, Novo Sarajevo, Novi Grad, Vogošća, and Ilidža. It had about 500,000 inhabitants with a multi-ethnic structure of the population. Unfortunately, during the war, Sarajevo suffered the longest siege in the modern history that lasted for more than 1,000 days, with almost 500,000 of projectiles fired, and near 11,500 people dead, tens of thousands wounded, and a terrible destruction. The war in Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992 to 1995 has strongly changed the life of the people and the structure of the territory. Ethnic divisions, population exchange, restructuring of social, political, economic, and cultural systems, as well as the construction of new urban typologies, are defined as the process of transition of spatial identities. The focus of this transition is on the migration dynamics of the so-called internally displaced persons, resulting in the patterns of construction of new neighborhoods and new coordinates of everyday life. Following the Dayton Peace Agreement, the city as well as the state was divided by the inter-entity borderline, passing through the middle of the Dobrinja housing neighborhood in Sarajevo, including two houses, apartments, private yards, streets, and open public spaces. This way of division demonstrates its own absurdity, as well as the senselessness of the war, both to the territory and the destiny of millions of people directly affected. Thus, Sarajevo has become a border city, urban interstice between opposing political territories. Division is observed in all social, urban, and architectural aspects, where pulsating political elements are repeatedly renewed. But except for division, borders also generate ideas for new urban scenarios. However, ethnic circumscription in Sarajevo creates a new externalized sectarian urban node and territorial hardening of competing identity groups, but urban space remains handicapped by the characteristics of pluralism and interaction in this way. Therefore, the city of Sarajevo left destroyed and finally ethnically divided, so on the other side of the border, a completely new city of Sarajevo, East Sarajevo, was born. As we know, the new city is nothing actually new. We are witnesses of constant urban growth and construction of new neighborhoods and cities. However, urbanization is happening in different ways due to different conditions in different parts of the world. Contemporary armed conflicts and migratory processes of a large number of people around the world have their own spatial results, and even cities emerging in such exceptional conditions. We can see some examples of them. The new city of East Sarajevo is only one example which was established at the outskirts of Sarajevo after the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. For refugees and internally displaced persons under the influence of war, under the influence of fear, the will of the people, and the political decisions. This is also a traditional characteristic of the urban phenomena of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as cities were continuously demolished and reconstructed many times. So in Bosnia was created much more grotesque and more exotic living milieu, which is therefore more exceptional than others. The new city of Bosnia and Herzegovina is defined as a settlement that was constructed in a relatively short period of 20 years from the end of the war to nowadays, with the main character of being perceived as different from the previous one. The one existed before the war, and the one which is the newly constructed. Its exceptionality lies in the negation of the millennial values of the city as a promoter of the fundamental categories that make people in the community different. It erased specific historical values of Bosnian cities, which were characterized by multi-ethnicity, multiculturalism, and the culture of coexistence. Forced living and comings of people depending on ethnicity from and to cities in the process of population exchange and creation of ethnically homogenized territories is an important characteristic of its degradation. This is the point where the character of the new city of Bosnia and Herzegovina comes from. Far away from the universal values of the historical cosmopolitan cities and states, which in the peaceful, liberal, and tolerant atmosphere of the multicultural community provided conditions for strengthening different identities in the relationship and coexistence with others. Therefore, the emergence of a new city in the exceptional context of Bosnia and Herzegovina is seen as a process of retrograde transition from universally valuable to extraordinary opposite. The emphasis of this analysis is on the urban planning documentation as the representation of the official politics as the main agent of the new city construction of East Sarajevo. Urban activities are set in the institutional framework in which the planning is based on a top-down system. It includes spatial plans of the Republic of Srpska, spatial plan and urban plan of East Sarajevo, and the plan of detailed regulation of According to the division of Sarajevo, 61% of the city territory belonged to the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is now Canton of Sarajevo, and 39 belonged to the Republic of Srpska. Restoring the territory, which was under control of Sarajevo's Serbs during the war, was marked as a peaceful reintegration of Sarajevo and took place in a still unrevealed, several months long process. Driven by fear and with a strong political campaign, Serbs left their centuries-old homes in Sarajevo. Tens of thousands of Serbs inhabitants from the southwest zone of Sarajevo in only a few days had left the area of fear in convoys. The convoy was moving towards the eastern zone of the city, towards Lukavica neighborhood, the territory of the Republic of Srpska, which was the first destination of the displaced and where the nucleus of the new city was later formed. Srpsko Sarajevo and later East Sarajevo was politically promoted as an alternative to mono-ethnic city of Sarajevo, the idea of which was to reassure Sarajevo for or only for Serbs. However, except of the idea, there was almost nothing. There were no infrastructure or accommodation facilities in the area of today's town. Entire families were placed in military dormitories in barracks of the previous Yugoslav army, which served as temporary shelters. The atmosphere was confusing, chaotic, and apocalyptic. There was no certainty that peace will be really implemented or what territories will really remain in the framework of the Republic of Srpska. In that situation, the most important task was to return the hope for the future and the right to retain in the area of Sarajevo. Milojevic emphasizes political factors is crucial for the character and intensity of urban transformation of this area. Therefore, the development process of East Sarajevo has different forms on urban morphogenesis when compared to the most cities with historical continuity. The political vision of Sarajevo for Serbs entered the planning system of the Republic of Srpska immediately after the peace agreement. Accordingly, the system of planning had great responsibility in the process of construction, and the planning factor is set to an important position of all stakeholders in the beginning of the city. However, planning documentation is done in a period when political factors are changeable categories. Name of the city, the basic concept, and the population have been changed in the meantime. Agents of the foundation and construction of the city of Sarajevo were first political leaders of the Republic of Srpska, supported by the state and the system of urban and spatial planning. The initial potential of construction were Serbs, refugees from Sarajevo, and the strong post-war enthusiasm of reconstruction. In this context, we must say that inter-ethnic conflicts are connected with the territory because the legacy of conflict and its spatial expression includes symbolic spatial markers. On the other hand, it is the issue of how identities can be given agreed and officially legitimized forms of expression. The profound link between identity and place makes this issue a spatial planning matter as well. But within the communicative term of planning territory, emotive notions such as ethnicity and homeland are disciplinary blind spots, despite the fact that in most parts of the world, these realities are central to the production of space which engages with people's actual life and meanings. Therefore, the system of planning shows a number of weaknesses when questioning cultural identity, and many of its elements are being lost. Saying about planning system, we will start with the spatial plan of the Republic of Srpska from 1996. When the Srpsko Sarajevo was mentioned for the first time. It was planned for as a territory of almost 2,000 square kilometers with 265 settlements and around 81,000 inhabitants, including 41,000 refugees. The main planned development and priorities were accommodation for refugees and internally displaced persons, organization of work activities, reconstruction of housing, and the expansion of cities and their suburbs. Srpsko Sarajevo is defined as a city that has the need to maintain the continuity of the capital and one of the main urban centers of the Republic of Srpska for functional, political, strategic, and other reasons. However, it remains only a vision because at that time the city was territorially broken and practically didn't exist. Srpsko Sarajevo, as well as the Republic of Srpska, were presented and treated as completely independent units without any relationship with Sarajevo or with Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you can see on this slide. Spatial plan was followed by other plans, changes, and additions that would adapt to changes in space and lower order plans. In this context, the urban plan of East Sarajevo from 2001 admits that the area doesn't have an urban potential that had been designed through a political program. Having in mind restrictions of spatial filling and depth emptying, the urban territory was planned as the city region composed of the municipalities of Pale, Rogatica, Sokolac, Srpski Stari Grad, Srpsko Novo Sarajevo, Srpska Ilidža, and Trnovo. The future city is being defined as a political and administrative center of the region. The existing urban areas, without any cohesion force, were divided into several dispersed groups that functioned as nodes that should be interconnected. The total area had 2,500 hectares, with 14 settlements, 7,000 households, and 25,000 inhabitants, including 64.5% of refugees. The central urban area occupied approximately 300 hectares of the land, which was mainly donation of the army of the Republic of Srpska. The dominant planned facility was housing, with planned construction for the 95,000 inhabitants in the urban area and 120,000 inhabitants throughout the whole region. A partial support for this task the authors found in response to the spatial potential of the city of Sarajevo. Thus, the plan made a distance from the megalomaniac vision, and 5 years after the adoption of the spatial plan of the Republic of Srpska, the discourse was trying to change, so the attention is drawn to the necessity of achieving direct and cohesive connections with Sarajevo. Here is a few slides showing the spatial situation that I mentioned, the newly formed inner urban zone of the city of Istočno Sarajevo in relation with Sarajevo, and some extracts from the urban plan of East Sarajevo, as well as mentioned surfaces and areas. The first regulation plan of the new city was also incomplete and contradictory. On the one hand, it has been criticized for ambitious requirements which are beyond possibilities, and on the other hand, it promoted inconsistent ideas between the concept and the political idea of its creation. The plan actually doesn't demonstrate the importance of the city in terms of ideology, because as Lefebvre, for example, claims, there is a confusion of ideology and economics when constructing the political city, while the official policy and the spatial plan ignored the relationship with Sarajevo. This plan makes the inversion. According to the architect of this plan, Mr. Milan Medic, the plan included the concept of physical, formal, and functional continuity with the city of Sarajevo, maintaining the infrastructure and the existing urban metrics of the Dobrinja neighborhood with the character of open block or semi-open city block in an open rectangular system. Although the urban design is developed with details, the city was still a heterogeneous structure as a part of the large conglomeration intersected with infrastructure networks and borders. However, the change of socio-economic system since 1995 due to the development of the market economy, the emergence of private capital and investments in the construction segment have become to shape a new urban transformation by market-oriented logic. So zones, so different detailed regulations plans appeared in the framework of the first plan. There were many plans and many additions to that, to plans, and many revisions of the same ones. Finally, the spatial plan of East Sarajevo was approved in 2008, given that it is adopted after the large spatial changes have already taken place. It mainly finds the current situation, defines certain phenomena, and provides only expected changes. The size reduction of the original concept of the city, which is mainly achieved by decreasing the urban core. Due to the dispersion and polycentrism of the territory, the development towards the greater connection between the city and the countryside was favored. As a special urban typology, the suburban was introduced in order to create a network of the typical conglomerations near the city, with a large number of inhabitants, as well as dispersed public and commercial facilities supposed to be altogether connected. Well, this analysis of the planning and construction of East Sarajevo, the chronology of plans and inconsistent hierarchy of the process illustrated the complex post-war context in Bosnia. Analysis show the evolution of irrational political ideas that stopped halfway, given the exception of observing the city as an ethnically isolated category. Evolution was moved up to almost complete disappearance of this attitude and the complete change of discourse. It has evolved from a purely ethnic and fully independent position to the attitude that discusses the importance of multi-ethnic, multicultural, and interdependent relations between the two cities standing next to each other. Except for the existing of the Serbs city of Sarajevo and its pure ethnic structure, it cannot build much more of the main ideas for the new city. comparing to the Sarajevo, it is more or less similar situation. Despite the first visions, East Sarajevo is actually the city reduced to urban agglomeration, Lukavica, Istočna Iliđa, which is still territorially fragmented, indefinite, broken, porous, incomplete, empty, desolate, and slow, based on Sarajevo, which is right there on the other side of the street, other side of the border. In relation to Sarajevo, it can be considered as part of the series of suburbs, kind of contemporary extension or sustainable suburb of Sarajevo, with the qualities of some central features. Unreal Fever explains that this new urban landscape is forming in such a way that the boundaries between the cities and their surroundings are made relative. According to this, the process of construction of East Sarajevo representing an expression of resilience for the growth and expansion of the city of Sarajevo. Well, despite many debates and illusions about the importance, size, and construction of the new city, which would be a counterpart to Sarajevo in the new division between poles and ethnic centers of power, this idea was not actually realized. The government of the Republic of Srpska has never allocated promised funds for the construction of a planned new facilities, while major institutions of the Republic are located in Banja Luka. Center of urban life of the region of Sarajevo remained in the Federation. Finally, this analysis shows that the political will, utopian vision, and the plan are not actually sufficient elements for the construction of a new city, because it is a long-term process which is ongoing and which cannot ignore its close context. Such artificial top-down system with the state as the main agent lacks construction of urban way of life, art of living in the city, construction of the sense of belonging to the place, and many others. This is a long-term continuous process that goes beyond temporality of a political will and political idea. Planned development, which predicted formation for the city of 100,000 inhabitants, takes place in slower dynamics, but it doesn't stop. Regardless of exceptional context, the case study shows that politics and urban development adapt to conditions over the time. Due to the time factor in which political power was losing its strength and the refugee potential was vanished, the private capital of the transition process appears as an important agent and the only one which could continue the process of urban transformation of the whole territory, including both or even more cities of Sarajevo. When speaking about cultural identity, we can say it is at least doubled. At the same time, with existence of the old identities, with existence of collective memory, there are also new ones compared to the ones existed 20 or 30 years ago. statistics, Herman Jergovic and many other artists who no longer live in Sarajevo precisely speak about the change of identity, the change of the city, the change of Sarajevo and people of Sarajevo, both in Sarajevo, East Sarajevo, and all around the world. And within Sarajevo itself, we speak about the city that has to face its past and its mentality in order to move forward. Thinking about future scenarios for the development of resilience of both cities or this unique urban conglomeration, it would again be necessary to recall several resilience characteristics. Saying that resilience thinking helps to interlink the spatial dynamics that lead to different urban forms with respect to the vulnerabilities of urban systems. Resilience is a system and strategy to face unpredicted changes. Resilience deals with situations when imbalance is created. It is resilience that reminds us of the errors in planning and follows the doctrine of sustainability. Regarding the previous future scenarios for resilience development of East Sarajevo, should rethink many elements which were missing until now. To support non-market-oriented development patterns which reduce negative impacts on cities of neoliberal economy. To support ecologically driven urban development approaches. To introduce participatory approaches instead of state-led land use planning. To consider urban development driven ecology conscious approach. To highlight the networks binding together urban and rural areas. To include sustainable resource management and support for biodiversity. To develop capacity to adapt in environmental pressures. To reconsider a replacement of short-term growth objectives with long-term sustainability agendas. To reconsider behavioral changes incentivized by ecological compensation schemes. To work on implementation integral urban planning approach for which the concept of a new urban governance model is required, and etc. Finally, the specific context of divided Bosnia and Herzegovina set the stage for a testing ground close to the origins and to the inner world. Instead of conclusion, I will again ask a question with no pressure to answer immediately, or no pressure for me to answer to you. The question is, could the border, instead of being a zone of avoidance it is now, become a driving force for the conflicting systems? All outcomes of such debates are temporary solutions, which indicates that temporariness is a crucial notion. Therefore, instead of the utopian idea of stability, we could maybe think about perpetual instability, a constant renegotiated temporariness. The last 20 years have shown us it is our reality in everyday political meaning. But is it possible to turn this situation in our favor, in favor of urban design and in favor of urban space? That's all for me, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Igor, so much for your presentation. We did have a bit of issues with the sound. The lecture was really great, but we did have a bit of issues with the sound. Still, we could follow it, and I think or I'm hoping that we will get a lot of questions from the audience. So at this point, I would like to open up the floor to all of you who are here on Zoom with us, and also for those of you who are watching live via Facebook. If you could please either type in your question, I could read it out for Igor, or if you feel comfortable for those joining in on Zoom to ask a direct question, that is also a possibility. So in the meantime, while we are waiting for questions from the audience, perhaps we can start with a bit of a discussion. You had a very similar lecture, a bit different obviously, but a similar lecture last year. And for me, it was very fascinating as an architect living in Sarajevo. You know, I actually myself was not aware of how little I knew about East Sarajevo, right? And so for me, your lecture was really kind of eye-opening and fascinating in terms of like this urban development that's happened. And it's literally a city next to a city, right? They even share certain areas like in Dobrinja, and yet the urban planning issues are so drastic, or the urban planning moves are so drastic that at some point there are some serious like disconnections. So I took my first visit to East Sarajevo not so long ago with a mutual friend of ours, and he kind of took me through Boris. So I would also like to say hi to Boris. He was our guest last year as well. So he took me through a bit of a tour of East Sarajevo, and he was showing me like, you know, there at certain points there's a bike lane that's supposed to continue. You know, it's like a bike that's supposed to continue. It was for it to continue to Dobrinja, but then on the other side there was like something else built. I think it was a church or something. Completely stops. You know, and this, you know, this kind of planning doesn't really go in favor of either side, right? If there's this huge disconnect. And then there's also the issue of transportation, because that Boris was explaining to me, you see right behind here at Bratza, and it's actually really close, but in order to get to the city, I have to take the bus line to, you know, the main station, and then from the main station go all the way around. So it takes him like an hour if you take the public transportation. But in fact, if there was a better kind of like transport networking, you know, you could be from like one place to the other within like 15-minute drive realistically, right? So I guess my question for you would be, do you think, like, what are the next steps? I know you talk about the next steps and like kind of ideologically and stuff like that, but I also wanted to ask you, like, I mean, literally there's so many people who live in East Sarajevo and commute every day to the center, to the Sarajevo center, right? So it's like, what is the reality for these people? Are we going to continue living like this next to each other and kind of ignoring each other? Or like, how to kind of integrate the two cities to at least work in kind of a infrastructural manner, if we cannot, if at least as a start, right? Like, let's connect the infrastructure, let's connect where one path starts, it can continue to the next, you know? So it's like, how do we start? Do you think there is a hope for that, or what are your thoughts on this matter?
Thanks, Leila. Well, I think that this speech tonight, this lecture, is also one of the first steps. Also, my previous lecture last year at Kuma International Architecture Week is like the first step. I mean, we always speak only about Sarajevo, also about that collective memory which we all have on Sarajevo, and I think that we are actually stuck in the past by speaking about Sarajevo. And on the other side of the border, on the other side, in the East Sarajevo, we don't actually speak about the city, about urban development. We just accept it as a fact, and that there is no much there is no any discussion actually about connection of these two cities, which is of course political strategy. But I think that meetings like this one tonight, when we actually open debate about connecting two cities, can really help. There are also some signs of political will to connect more, as for example the Olympic Games for youth were organized in both cities together, and finally, but I mean, everyday life of the people from both cities, which are connected naturally, will actually make the pressure on urban planners and politicians to do something more in connecting two cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I guess we have to start from the basic discussions first, and recognizing that the issues are there, right? And then it's a long process.
And I would also encourage colleagues, especially young colleagues, architects and urban planners, also students, to take the role, to take the flagship, and to write projects, to make projects, and to realize something between two cities, because it has so much potential. I mean, that border, which is also kind of urban void between those two cities, is so strong potential for development, and I'm sure that is a field for reacting of the younger generation, if older ones couldn't do much more.
It's a very good point, Igor. Very good point. I just want to see, we do have some question, or we have one question from Amil, and he says the European Big Festival that was held not so long ago was a great example of a collaborative effort between the two cities. What other projects, especially related to improvement of infrastructure, could inspire more collaboration between these two cities? It's a great question. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think that yes, infrastructure is really problem, and it should be resolved. But when we speak about infrastructure, it is always question of the money, because infrastructure is always like a group of complex projects that need to be developed, and it takes so much time and so much money, and it is a bit complicated, especially when we speak about the completely different laws which operates from the different sides of the borders. So it is complicated. But on the other side, Leila, you just mentioned your, let's say, urban walk with Boris through East Sarajevo. So that is maybe improvement of infrastructure that could inspire more collaboration. We can always organize urban walks with how to say, normal people, with normal inhabitants, to use the space, to walk through the space, to tell the stories, to make some, let's say, cultural routes or historical routes or whatever routes, just to walk, to make that connection, to live, and then infrastructure will for sure appear immediately after, when the citizens were already made a pressure to politicians or to professionals. I think that we as citizens, we have a great role and great, how to say, responsibility, because we cannot wait more for politicians or for, I don't know who, European Union or whatever. We must react by ourselves, because there is no one else to react instead of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. So next thing up is Kuma walking tours or collaborative walking tours.
Yes.
So
Why not?
sure, something to think about. In any case, we had many plans with you for this year for Kuma, which hopefully we will get to realize next year if everything goes okay. So we want to talk more about that. We will keep everyone kind of hanging, yes, thinking what that could be. So are there any more questions for Igor? I didn't see any more questions for Igor. Maybe everyone's a bit tired. It's 8 o'clock. It's a Tuesday. Fair enough. And so, Igor, I really wanted to thank you for being with us again tonight, for giving us a very interesting lecture and to raising up very good points and lots of things to think about, and actually lots of things to act upon as well, in many ways. And so to continue or to finish up our Kuma International Architecture Month, on Thursday we will have Nasiha Pazder with us, and she will also be kind of talking about urban planning issues, and from the Sarajevo perspective, but she will be also talking about that urban void, which we talked about a little bit tonight in terms of Dobrinja. And so once again, everyone, thank you so much for being with us here tonight on Facebook, on Zoom, and we hope to see everybody on Thursday for our very last lecture.